Hey guys, welcome to oh, you guys, I thought I didn't have my headphones on. Oh my goodness. I really was like, oh shit. Um, Welcome to She Knows Arsenal. My name is Jessica and I'm your host, and you can follow me on Twitter at It's Justino. So today we're going to be doing a live match preview for Arsenal versus Chelsea, London Derby time. You know, just as good a time as any to play Chelsea, I guess, and I always kind of maintained at the beginning of the season, or when I saw the schedule come out, that I'd prefer to play some of the more difficult teams early, because to me, I'm not really worried about how we're going to set up against the tougher teams. I'm more concerned about being as close to our starting 11 going into October, November, because that's for me when the matches that we really should be winning are going to come up. So there is a lot of bit of pressure on us. There's a lot of pressure on Arteta. I think a lot of people are looking for a performance in stark contrast to what we saw against Brentford. What we saw against Brentford was not a performance at all. It was a lay down and take it. It really, really was. So at the very least, at home, I think what we're expecting is a performance. And then it wouldn't be nice to come away with a result. There's a lot of pressure, I feel like, more on Chelsea, because over the last couple of games we have some juju over them. Let's just say it that way. We do. No matter how bad we are, we tend to get a result against them. And I think they come into most games against us quite cocky. They have done even when Lampard was in charge, and we still come away with points. So we'll see how it kind of shakes out. But before we get into, the preview, we will do, talk about availability. Obviously, Odegaard and Ramsdale have been announced both on the same day, which is nice. They've done their media duties and all of that, which we can talk about as well. We'll do our predicted lineup and score predictions, and then talk to you guys. You guys can have your say. But I just want to kind of start off with, I think, it's pretty freaking obvious what the plan is. A lot of fans have been, I think, a little bit, maybe, I don't know, maybe because it just sounds good, but saying that there is no plan, there's no process, there's no thought behind what we're doing. And that's clearly not true. It's very obvious that we're bringing in players between the ages of 21 and 23 to build for the future. Very highly regarded, very talented young players. May not be the finished article, but it's clear that we're trying to build a young core of players. A lot of them being English, have them grow together, and then have a really good, still young team in the next 2 to 3 years. I think that's pretty obvious. So when that's what the club is clearly telling you, and I think even Arteta said in one of his press conferences that by what we've done in the market, you can see what we're trying to do. I think you have to make your kind of conclusions about what we've done based on what the goal is. It's clear that the goal is to be a really strong team within the next 2 to 3 years. I don't think you can look at what we've done in this window and say, yeah, we're going for top four. And yeah, for an Arsenal team, the goal should be Champions League, and that's based on our history. But I hate to be this person, but I just feel like, yeah, Arsenal may be a Champions League team based on our history, but we kind of have to let that go and see where we've been. We have been horrible for like 10 years. We have not been competitive for a very long time, and we need to tear it down and start over. And unfortunately, because of the type of management or the type of ownership that we have, we're not going to be in the same type of positions as Man City and Chelsea, where they can spend loads of money on world-class players in their prime. That's just not, we don't have that. We don't have that ability. It's unfortunate that we've started this rebuild when we have almost no value left in our squad in terms of our older players or players that nobody would touch. We put them on bad contracts. So it's going to take longer. And because of that and the pandemic, we're in a position where we have to attract really young players and hope that they grow together, build value back in our squad, and move forward. And that's going to take time. Once we didn't get James Maddison, it became very clear to me that we were looking towards the future. So my expectations changed like that. It changed just like that overnight. I was like, okay, this is a longer term project. We're going to just move on from there. Europe is a bare minimum. So I'm not going to change and flip flop and say it's okay for us to be outside of Europe, because it's not. 1 year out of Europe is bad enough as it is. But I still see some people saying, all we did was get Lokonga and White and Odegaard, and that's not good enough to get top four. Well, of course not, because it's supposed to be good enough to get top four in the next 2 to 3 years. It's obvious that that's what we're trying to do. So it's kind of like moving the goalpost when you know that that's not really what we're trying to do. And so I almost feel like you have to make your conclusions about what we've done in this window and the last one based on what the goals of the club actually are, which at the moment is not top four today, it's top four in the next 2 to 3 years. And this is a completely separate conversation from Arteta, because these players don't really, for me, say, okay, this is an Arteta team. This is what the club wants. The club has made a decision to go in this direction. So whoever comes in after Arteta will be dealing with these players as well. It's still a young rebuild. Even if a new manager comes in, they're not going to scrap all these players and start over. This is what we have. And the players that we brought in are really exciting. And, I've tempered my expectations. My expectations are Europe, but to see people saying it's a 2 out of 10 window because it's not going to get us top four, I think is a little bit silly, considering it's obvious that that's not what we're trying to do. And I get City and Chelsea don't think about the future, but we're not City and Chelsea, and we never will be under this management or this ownership. So that's just kind of like my little rant, because it's just this thing where it's like you're going to be miserable forever if you just can't get with the program. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is a good window, still not perfect. I still think it's like a 6.5 out of 10, but we have brought in really good young players that will increase the value of our squad. And I think in the next couple of years, we will be able to get into the top four if everything goes to plan. But I mean, sometimes it just feels like we have to be so extreme, and I am still hoping that we get some more things done, and we'll see what unfolds in the next couple of days. But yeah, that's just my little rant. You guys can let me know what you guys think in the chat box. And without further ado, I'm going to bring in Souls and George. But before we say anything, it's George's birthday. Happy birthday, George. In the chat box, everybody say happy birthday, George. Woo!
Thank you. Another year older, none the wiser.
Well, I don't think that that's true. You probably learned so much today. How many books do you think George has read today? How many? We all know that you're a scholar.
I have got 0 work done today.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's me every day. So that's me every day. I don't get any work done any day. I really just put together this stream like 10 minutes ago. I don't know what I've done today, but yeah, you guys, like, that's just my little rant. And obviously, like, everybody has different expectations. And, some people just feel like Arsenal should be in the top four. So if we're not, we're failing. I completely get that. But we're tearing it down and starting over, guys. So you can't expect to tear it down and then go straight up to the top right then. We have never tried to actually rebuild the squad, opinion. It's always been band-aids and paperings over the cracks and buying one good player here and hoping that they save us and all this kind of stuff. So, you know what I mean? George, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, first, thanks so much for the love, guys, in the comments and everything, and the birthday wishes. It is appreciated, truly. But yeah, no, back to like the real important stuff. So the thing that I'm looking at right now is we get drawn into manager debates because it seems to be fashionable right now. We like to assign a pill or a reason why we're so bad, why it's only one person. And the one thing I'll say is, regardless of what you think of the manager, I kind of want to put that to a side, but evaluating the squad profile right now, there's been an absolute clear transfer policy change since the Raul and the Emery eras and previous to now in terms of what our recruitment strategy is. And when you start to go through the cogs of the team, like you said, Jess, regardless of current quality, factually, the age profile of this squad has taken a drastic turn in the last 18 months. That leaves the future completely open to anybody coming in and anybody coming in to work with this squad, both managerial or up top. And I think when you open that possibility, the first thing that you can see is, these are the pillars for what a lot of great teams look for. I'm really sick and tired of seeing how great Leicester is when in reality, the profile of age that we have looked at is very similar to what smart teams do. And for me, it's just bias at this point. I'm not happy with all of the quality in terms of individual players. I'm not going to sit here and say I approve everything and what we've done is absolutely smart, but just factually, we have recruited leaders that are under 24 that are going to last not just the manager, but outlast this era. Like this idea that we have bought these players is not just in the short term, but it's planning in a short, medium, and long term. So I just don't think that the club gets enough respect for its approach currently, because it is absolutely a change in values. Because we haven't seen the same wage demands with the same players, and there is a difference. Whether that works out or not, I'm not too sure, but at least there's a concerted effort to change it. That is what deserves plaudits for me.
Neek says, Arsenal are building for the future, but if you don't progress quickly, some of your best young players like Saka will leave, will set back your progress. And that's I think it's a possibility, but it is a narrative floating around that's kind of like the counter to this longer term rebuild thing. And I completely get that, because every time that, we have a good player, the next thing is, well, first they're no good. And then as soon as they become good and we recognize them, well, they need to leave Arsenal because Arsenal are terrible, So I get that. But at the same time, it's the difference between then and now. And what I hope is that we'll be able to, I think it's a very, very real possibility that some of the young players that we have now will leave and we will sell. Like, I don't think we keep all of them. I don't think that's realistic. My hope would be that we use whatever we get for these young players and replace. That's the thing. When you have young players, you have to, if you sell at the right time, you'll recoup a value that will help you be able to still sustain and get better. And so we can't be afraid of that, because I feel like when you do build this way, the goal is to at some point sell and replace, and I think the name Saka is probably what would make people push back, because they don't want to think about Saka. But what I'm thinking about is maybe a Lokonga or a Martinelli, maybe somebody that's not a Hale End graduate. It's going to happen, but as long as we replace well, you won't set back your progress if you replace well. And I'm sorry, the only teams that are going to be able to buy Saka are probably Premier League teams, and we wouldn't ask them for anything less than 100 million. You know what I mean? So if he were to go to City would have to give us 100 million.
But
could we not replace with that?
But you know what it is? It's a narrative that's been set, but there's no context behind it at all. And what I mean by that is, it's a lot of players, especially young and ambitious ones, will look at the plan and will look at what the club is trying to do before making a decision on whether they want to leave is better for their career and for their future. Now, obviously, not every time does it work out. Not every time does, the plan work out in the way that you thought, or how quickly you thought you'd get it and return on investment. But I don't really know what the fans want. I don't really know what rivals want, because when we buy Williams and your David Luiz and your Petr Cechs and the Bantringers, when we buy Young, the Bantringers, it's like, I think the club have now just thought, you know what, forget about the social media and the general media narrative that they're setting. We'll do what we believe is right. And I do like that. I think they're standing their ground and saying, you know what, it's not what the fans want, it's not what the media expects, but this is what we believe is right for the club and now. And also, it's like, we can't compete financially on a yearly basis against the likes of Chelsea, City, United, and stuff like that. So when we buy Young, we're banking on their potential to be as good, so that the gap in about 2 to 3 years is actually smaller and easier to recoup, so that when you then buy that 1 or 2 players, that's the gap being, basically shortened. And I think that's what they're trying to do.
This is really funny. I just need to put this out here really quick. Aston Villa is bigger than Arsenal. Are you an Aston Villa fan? Saka's not worth 100 million. Mount is worth that. Sorry, but you have to win a trophy to be a big money player. Are you not an Aston Villa fan? You guys haven't won anything. Jack Grealish just went for 100 million to City. What are you saying? Please tell me you're an Aston Villa fan. Do you see what I'm saying? He's literally saying that you have to win a trophy to be a big money player, when Jack Grealish literally just left their team.
I
This
think
is
the hypocrisy's there.
this
I don't
is
know. I don't pay
insane.
attention.
Like this comment is actually makes no sense, and we're not talking about right now, tomorrow. And yeah, in order for somebody to take Saka from us, they would have to pay 100 million. So either he goes for that, or he doesn't go at all. But did you want to say something, George? Just to
I
finish
did,
off.
because I have a pushback to this notion that these guys will leave. And, because look, when you have a recruitment strategy that is much more Dortmund-like in future, that is sustainable. That is what these good clubs do. The Leipzig, the Atlantas of this world, the Dortmunds, they do this model so that it is sustainable over years in the worst case scenario of your youngsters leaving. But also, we have not done this selling club notion for quite a while. And I want to really dispel this idea of your Sakas, because rivals are threatened. They do Saka to throw in banter, to make it on purpose so that we get angry. And fundamentally, when you've got these kids citing, Rocastle as one of their heroes, and not understanding that producing your own talents and integrating them into the first team is not the same as letting foreign talents go. I'm actually not worried about Hale and talents. These are guys that have grown up in the fabric of the club. And this is where dynasties were built on. Why La Masia was so connected for so long. You don't think that they had offers? You don't think they had greener pastures? And it wasn't a case of just, success driving their will to stay. It was their fabric and love for the club. And that's absolutely critical when you're evaluating what youngsters are likely to leave and what youngsters aren't. Now, when you're looking at Arsenal, we are now proving to be an environment to thrive for youngsters. We're becoming a destination again for people to come and say, yep, you know what? That's an environment where they give chances. That's an environment where we see a project going. And those are very crucial to a lot of the decisions of these young players, because I think short-term success doesn't buy you long-term success. And your approach to how you do those things cements whether or not it can be sustained. And for me, the moves about what we've done in the academy, what Per Mertesacker has done, the conveyor belt of Hale and talent that is continuing to come, means not only do I think it's less likely that they leave because they want to fulfill their dream of playing with their mates and making it here at Arsenal, but this secondary idea that if they do leave in the worst case scenario, we're making the right moves to replace them. And that should be the point. That should be the point that not just rivals, but Arsenal fans should take solace in, but rivals should be jealous of, because these are what smart clubs do. In the worst case scenario, at least your process is correct. When you arrive there by chance, or when you arrive there by spending money, I don't believe that's sustainable. Dynasties have never done that. So for me, kudos to the management.
All right, you guys, let's get into this preview. There's about 140 of you guys watching right now. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with a friend. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So let's talk about Odegaard and Ramsdale just very quickly about their, they've been unveiled, they've been announced, they're now Arsenal players. Odegaard is not going to be able to play because his visa has not come through, but Ramsdale will probably be on the bench. Wow, his interview had me shook. Like, I already knew that he's a confident, young man. Like, he's not a wallflower. We know that. He's 23 years old. He started for Premier League teams. He's not like just this. He's not Runnerson, okay? But he literally came in there and said, I'm here to compete with Leno and take the shirt. I mean, Leno has to be shook. I think he's already shook up. But Souls, when you hear that, do you think that's the type of energy that we've probably been missing at Arsenal? A little bit of competitive edge? I think we're a little bit too nicey nice in the locker room, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things today, obviously, in the morning, I was watching a Rio Ferdinand podcast, and he was talking about the atmosphere at United and how they maintain their sort of high standards and high levels. And he was talking about Fergie wanting to replace players because they started to affect the dressing room in a negative way. And there were big name players like David Beckham, Ruud van Nistelrooy, Eric Cantona, and the likes he was getting rid of, and bringing in players who were hungry, fresh blood, to compete with the players that were in and around the dressing room. And I think Ramsdale, from his interview, really is trying to add that. And for far too long, well, not far too long, but for a season or so since Martinez has left, Leno knows he's number one. However, Martinez came to be sold, Leno knew at that point, yeah, he's number one. There is no one coming in that's touching his spot, no matter what he does. And I think the season he's had to still be the number one, and for us to not show the ambition to go for a number one, was probably what told Leno, I can do whatever I want, and they're not going to drop me. Because are they really going to play Runnison? No. And then when Matty Ryan came in, obviously at the beginning of his sort of tenure, he was a bit injured. He was out of the game, and he came in in the latter stages of the season where it didn't really matter. So I do think looking at that sort of Prescott, he's got the mentality down. Now, whether he has the ability is the other question. But for me, that is what I want to see. Is the mentality has to be right. And if Leno's got any self-dignity, any self-pride, he better be shook. I want him to be shook. That's the thing, because you can't have a man come in, 23 years old, not even play a game yet, and go, I'm coming for you. That would shit me up. I'd be like, okay, I better pattern up.
George, how long do you think it is before Ramsdale is starting games for Arsenal? I mean, I just feel... I mean, there were reports that came out today that, like, amongst the executives or the management team, it's already kind of like known that this is Leno's last year. But Ramsdale is clearly coming to he's not going to want to sit on the bench, and I'm sure he'll get some time in the cups coming up. But do you think there's a chance that sooner rather than later, Ramsdale really fights for that number one position, and maybe we're seeing him as the number one and Leno take the bench?
I think as soon as after this international break. I don't think people understand. Look, me and Harry were very vocal about how bad goalkeeper has been for us.
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize how done Arteta is with Leno and how bad he is to our build-up. And look, I upset a lot of people with my post about Ramsdale. I back it. I've done the research. I've scouted him, and I see what they see. There's a lot of misconceptions about his talent, a lot of misconceptions about his mentality, and there's a lot of misconceptions about what a goalkeeper at 23 years old should be expected to show like. And this idea that Alisson, this idea that, your Edersons were the complete article at 23 is ridiculous. I think factually what you are buying is a keeper ready for the next decade. I think when you're looking at Ramsdale, I have said those traits that I see right there in terms of his elite clip ball to the wings. He's got these basic fundamentals, his ability to claim crosses. There is a really, really good fundamental player there. He makes quick decisions, very Emmy-like in the sense that whether it's not always right or wrong, he makes them quick. And that is absolutely essential for a goalkeeper. And I just think that there's been a lot of narrative right now that Ramsdale and his actual ID is not lining up with a lot of fans, but also people that aren't willing to open their minds and do the due diligence. Because absolutely, I back the Ramsdale signing. I do rate it quite a bit. I think there were better quality to cost deals available on the market. But in terms of the player, I think there's going to be a little bit of short-term gain, and he absolutely will be an immense signing that will very much pay itself within 5 years as an outlook. One thing that I think I just want to really end on is I don't want to be that old elitist fan and be like, oh, you young guys don't remember. But really, you young guys don't remember David Seaman and his entire narrative of how he's arrived at Arsenal. I don't know if, fans are, old enough to remember, but David Seaman was not wanted. He was not met with somebody that, was desired about coming into the team. In fact, the narrative, he was, our third choice keeper for England. And then people wanted other people. There were fans in the stands kind of shouting, Lukic is better than Seaman. And there's a lot of similarities about how this move is coming from that. And I really do see Ramsdale stepping in, becoming a fixture of the team. I love his mentality. I really feel as though I don't think he's the next Seaman, but the idea that, he's come in from poor narrative of fans and surprised is absolutely spot on. And I don't know. I just think there's been a lot of people that have not done their proper due diligence, have looked at the name, poo-pooed it, and let other people's opinion and narrative guide their own without actually watching the talent. And yeah, I think there's a ton of surprises in store for him. And I just love the story of his grandfather coming in. Look, yeah, it choked me up, but I think it's worth it. It speaks to me about somebody who cares has the mentality, and isn't a snowflake. Those things about people saying, oh, well, what is he supposed to say on interviews? Well, I didn't expect him to say, I'm taking your shirt. I'm sorry. Like, those are some very specific things. And, look, I'm very much a
yet to
person.
hear somebody say that before.
I mean, look, you fail to prepare to fail. I say this so many times to, the kids that I coach, and mentality matters, guys. It really, really does. And so, especially for a goalkeeper, a position that, by the way, is alone, make no mistake about it, mentality and psychology for a keeper are probably the most important on any position in the pitch. So, yeah, I really think people are going to eat their words very, very quickly on Aaron Ramsdale.
Yeah, and this is not to, if you still have reservations, have reservations. You know what I mean? Like, some people, like, and even we do, have to see him in the shirt, see what happens. It's obviously, as who was it in the chat? Josh has said, it's also about the defenders that are in front of him. It's important to have a shield in front of him. We know that when you saw Alisson last season for Liverpool, amazing goalkeeper, world-class, like top level, did not look the same without Van Dijk and Joe Gomez in front of him. That's with every single goalkeeper. So unless we have the right defense in front of him, it won't matter. But his attitude seems on point. I like somebody who comes straight in and says, I'm willing to take your shirt. We haven't had energy like that at Arsenal. We've been very nicey for a very long time. We don't have bastards in our team. We don't have somebody that's like, you know what, actually, I don't rate you that much. I'm just going to take your spot. We have a lot of people that are just kind of like, oh, timid. And I think hopefully this new generation of players is willing to fight a little bit more, because we've never really had that. But let's talk about availability a little bit. I think we have an availability issue. I think going into Chelsea, you would prefer to have your top team, your best team, and we're not going to have that. Thomas Partey not available. Still not quite sure. Is Gabriel a little bit ways off, George? Do you know?
Yeah, he is.
He is, but I think it's very close, because, I mean, they said towards the end of the month, and that's next week. So it was a very short-term decision. And I think, he just maybe didn't make the daily cutoff. Like, he should have been within group training by Wednesday, for me, if you're going to start on the Sunday. But maybe he's only a couple days. It's not like he's out for a week and beyond that. I mean, he could be in contention for City, very much like Partey for me. And that's just the timeline. Like, maybe he's just, a couple days later, but it's nothing serious. I think he is a big miss, though, in terms of your projections for the game, for sure.
Gabriel and Thomas Partey are huge misses. We know that they make a huge difference. You go into this game with them and you really feel like you have a shot, but other than that, and, your Lacazettes and Willian, who I don't think anybody is really upset that won't be playing, and Runners, well, Willian's in contention, but Runnerson is not. Where we were hoping that Aubameyang is able to make it onto the bench. I doubt he starts the game. So we have a situation where we know we're going to have a very young front four. And so maybe chances are few and far between, but I think we have enough in midfield and defense to at least keep goals out. Do you guys feel as confident as I do about maybe the game being close? I don't think it's going to be a battering. What do you think, Souls?
I'm sick of this, man. I don't know where the chest has come from. I don't know why. I get it. I know you want to be confident, but I think Monster's the only reasonable Chelsea fan I've come across recently. It's like, you know what? Being truthful, it's going to be a tight game, like a 1-0, 2-1, that kind of thing. And I was like, all right, you're being reasonable here. And the thing is, yes, we're missing key players in terms of Partey and, Gabriel, and Aubameyang's a hit and miss at the moment. He probably won't start, but he'll be on the bench at least. And the issue for me is, it depends on how he sets up, really. If he goes for a 4-back, we're getting slaughtered. If he goes and matches a man-to-man and plays this 3-5 back formation, then I think we'd be more confident, because they're talking about Lukaku now. You've got to look at, how do you nullify Lukaku? You eliminate the space he has to be able to run into and create, and you've got to eliminate the chances he can create for himself. And you do that by overloading your box, playing a bit deeper than you normally want to, because you don't want to give the guy space. And that's what we need to do. And matching them on that formation, on a 5-back or a 3-back, is exactly how you do that. Because for me, Pablo Mari doesn't have the physical presence to deal with a Lukaku. Ben White and Gabriel possibly, yes. You can make the argument that they're good enough physically and they've got the pace to recover if needed. Whereas for me, Marie needs someone else with him alongside Ben White for that to feel a bit more stable. But then it also allows like Xhaka to get his game and implement his like how slow and immobile he is in that midfield. And when we kind of look at how we've beaten Chelsea in the past, it is by playing a little bit deeper and allowing them to come onto us, and then we break them on the counter. And I think that's all we've got to do. And I think it's all about the game plan that Arteta puts in. If his arrogance gets in the way and his ego gets in the way, that he wants to be stubborn and play this 4-2-3-1, then we might be in for a long game. And that's the only reservation. I'm not saying that's what he's going to do, or he can't change, or he won't change. It's just I've not seen him do that yet. So I just hope I hope he sets us up right.
Yeah, I'm just very annoyed because factually, let's have it right. Chelsea haven't beaten us in the league since 2019. The last 5 meetings, 3 of which they've lost, 1 of which has been a draw, and the last time they won was December 29th in 2019. Of all of those games, they've all been quite close, 1-0, 2-1, 3-1 wins for Arsenal. The draw was a 2-2, and their last win was 2-1. So this idea that in the very short term that you're going to have chest regardless of positioning, which didn't seem to fill a narrative last season when we had not arguably, but one of our worst seasons in absolute years, and we managed to beat and do the double over Chelsea, doesn't then mean that we can't compete in top 6 clashes, which we seem to have done under Arteta quite well. Now, in terms of the actual game, Souls is completely right. You have to match them 3-4-3, go man for man. And when you're looking at nullifying Lukaku, it's absolutely reducing the space that he can run into, because you're not going to stop Lukaku with speed. That's not going to be the case. And the biggest mistake that Crystal Palace made over the weekend was providing space to the wing backs and allowing Chelsea to complete their overloads. But really, if you do match Chelsea up, Villarreal showed it just a couple of weeks ago in terms of they don't create high quality chances when you take out the space. And for me, it's not a poor club mentality to recognize you don't have your star players available, sit in and counter. Why is that a bad thing? In fact, it's very logical. If I had Gabriel and Thomas Partey, I would sit there and say, look, let's have a different game plan. Let's take it to them. I'd actually be more confident in doing that. But we don't have our star players available, so why would I then want to open up? In terms of Sol's point about maybe potentially him reverting back, I don't agree. He did it against Stamford Bridge last season on either side of using the pivot. And so he's absolutely shown an idea to kind of, match the opposition if he needs to. And he's done that before. So I really do expect that. In terms of the game, it's going to be a tight game. Again, this idea that, Chelsea fans are going to speak with chest about guaranteeing a victory. You haven't won against us in the league since 2019. Regardless of how shit we are, just factually, you have not won, period. And I want to reiterate that for those that maybe can't hear. So if you haven't won since 2019, I don't know why you're going to get so much chest. That doesn't mean that we guarantee a victory. That doesn't mean that we're now, an amazing club. But to factually sit there and say that you're going to beat it for sure when you haven't won at a ground since 2019 is a little bit far for me. Look, I think it's going to be a very close game. I actually predict probably a 1-1 draw myself. I think it's going to be kind of a boring affair. I think we're going to sit in. I think without Aubameyang, really, I don't see a consistent goal threat for us. But last time we showed how our counter press would force them into mistakes. That wasn't a mistake on Chelsea's end. We forced that mistake. I'm tired of the narrative. That was our press winning that goal. And so I think we're going to see something very, very similar. We're going to cut the space out. You're going to see a repeat of the Villarreal. And I just don't think Chelsea create enough high quality chances in that system. So that's where I see the game going.
Myron Phillips put in a super chat. Thank you so much. Myron says, if you guys play any deeper against us, you're going to be in your own goal. Respectfully, Ben White is going to get ragdolled by Lukaku.
Good thing he starts out wide on the right, and that's not where Ben is.
Yeah, so sorry, guys. I know you guys want really badly for that narrative to make sense, but let's just see what Lukaku looks like in a Chelsea shirt before we start making like these real, like over the top, predictions on things. But Thank you so much for your super chat. So, in terms of playing out of the back, do you guys see that that's something that we probably have to skip? One thing that we do know about Chelsea is that they're pressing. They're going to press us really hard. I think they know Leno is shaky. Marie is probably a little bit on the shakier side. So, for like, how do we combat that? How do we make sure that we can still play our game? Because when we don't build out of the back, we have a very difficult time like building up, because then we end up kicking long and we don't have anybody that can hold the ball. So is there any way that we can continue to play out of the back? Is because at this point I'm kind of like, and I'd actually prefer to see Rob Holding back there because I think he's less shaky than Marie. Like because I think we should play 3 at the back. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. It's a weird one because I'm like, kicking it forward is basically just saying like, hey, we're just going to sit in our box without buildup. We're,
Well, I think,
dead.
look, Leno's going to be Leno, and he's going to ignore if there's any kind of fan pressure, regardless. Whether you want to plan to build up from the back or not, we know what he's going to do. I think sitting in deeply, it does restrict the space, and I think Ben White helps that massively in terms of, really isn't far that, Leno has to go in terms of build up. And I think when you do sit back with a 3, you give the defenders a lot more options. I agree with your analysis. I wouldn't have Marie anywhere near this team, and that's just because of pure form. I think his head's gone personally. I don't think he's as bad of a player that's we've been seeing the last couple of weeks, but just fundamentally 1v1 in defensive situations, I don't trust him right now. And I think we need a little bit more aerial competency. So I do think Holding, I agree with Oyatoleni. I'm going to do a stab at that name, but yeah, mate, that's exactly actually, I wouldn't put Mari personally, but I would put Tierney in the back there. I would have White holding Tierney, and then I would have Tavares, Xhaka, Lukunga, Ainsley, Maitland-Niles as the wing backs, and then I would put ESR, Martinelli, and Saka. I did tell people Martinelli is a 9. He's been training as a 9, and I really see that happening this game, particularly on the counterattack too. So he'll be our outlet threat for me. And that's the team that I would go with personally in the back. I think the reason I would probably not have, Chambers, and people might question, is purely for the aerial ability, I think, right now, just to combat Lukaku. I think if you restrict the space with the 3-4-3, you do reduce the space that he can run into. And Lukaku has this great out-to-in run that he's mastered from Serie A. But again, like I said, typically it started from the right and then he carried inside. And if you give him space in that channel, it's over. And that's why I'd probably want Tierney on that side. That's probably why I'd want even Holding on the side, because right now I need a front-footed defender for the battle. And I think that's what Lukaku is going to go for. He will dominate Marie both in space and aerially right now. So that's why I'm having my plan there. And I think put Ben White in this position that he's familiar. Right now, things are a little bit, kind of worrisome for him. He's doing things that, last game he didn't have the greatest game. So just put him in a system that he's familiar with, put him in an area and space that he likes. And I think we will thrive in that setting. But I still think it's going to be a very cagey game. I think this idea that's going to be one-way domination is going to be pretty poor. We're going to see a lot of U-shaped passing. I think we're going to sit in, and we're going to see a draw, in my opinion. But this is how I would set up to nullify Lukaku.
Souls, would you do anything different than, what George has up here? Like, this is pretty much what I would go with. Like, I really don't want to see any overthinking or I don't want to see a 4-2-3-1. We don't have what's necessary we have to match them up. We have to match them up. So I would like to see a 3-4-3, and I think this would be a good game from Ainsley Maitland-Niles. I do worry about his mentality in terms of like, hey, I need to move and I'm playing in this game, but I would trust him because, quite frankly, the last thing I want to see is Bellerin, Chambers, or Cedric. I need somebody, a competent defender, but also somebody who can run. And none of them can run. Not a single one of them can run. So is this what you would go with, Souls, like in terms of those 7? And then what would you do for the front 3? Because some people want Pepe to play, and I feel like he might miss out.
Yeah, I think you've got to match him, and I think Tierney as a left-sided centre back worked in this system, especially from if we are going to play out the back, he's probably the best player to have there, especially with his sort of long range passing as well, and being able to just cut open defenses. And he's a bit more smart with the way he plays. And then to have Ben White on the right hand side just balances it a little bit, because for me, I don't really trust Holding's ability to play out the back as much as I do with Ben White and Tierney. And I think this is how you transition a lot quicker in terms of your play from going back to forward. And then you've got Maitland-Niles again, who's a runner, Tavares, who's a raw, but that's what he does. He's an aggressive. He's very sort of, once he locks onto his target, he'll do everything he can to win that ball back. So that works, and it works in the system to even allow the attacking threat to happen as well, because Tavares will know that Tierney's behind him anyway if he needs that defensive cover. And then we know Xhaka stays back as well, so there's not really much concerns there. And then when you kind of go forward, this is where it gets really difficult, because you can do a whole host of things, but this is where it gets, for me, what I would do is ESR on the left, Martinelli down the middle, and Saka on the right is what I would play personally, because unfortunately ESR is probably our only out and out creative available player, and you need him, and I think that's what you do to balance the team as well. I just think Pepe would unbalance this team even if you put him in for one of them, because then you're like, well, we need him to come in somewhere. So who does he? And I just don't see Pepe. Pepe could be an impact player in this game, but just not starting for me. Saka's just too vital to the way we play. And then I just think Emil Smith Rowe is just one of those who drives the creativity in this team until at least Odegaard comes in. And then Martinelli, I've always dubbed this guy to be a number 9. I do think, I'd want to see him play there. I didn't think it'd happen, or the opportunities would arise so soon. But, you take your opportunities when they come, and now is the perfect time, because you've got nothing to lose. You can't play anywhere else there. Who else is there? Balogun? I'm sorry, it's just going to be the same thing anyway. So this is the perfect time to experiment with him, especially if Aubameyang is definitely not playing. But even then, I'd probably play Martinelli.
What I would say is that I don't think you could play Pepe without Lacazette. I feel Lacazette gives Pepe something to run off of into space. And with the 3 that we have here, I think we're looking a little bit more at intricate play to kind of get into open space. I think ESR and Saka play really well together. And without each other, they tend to look for somebody who's at the same technical quality of them, and they don't have that. If you don't have that, and you don't ESR, Lacazette, and Pepe works because you still have Lacazette. Without him, I feel like you just need another technical player in there, because Pepe is just running off of the striker anyway. So for me, I think you have to go with this front 3. It's not ideal, but it's what we have. And maybe Aubameyang's on the bench, but I still feel like he won't be ready to play anyway, and I don't anticipate them being as off as they were against Brentford. I think that was a one-off. I think they'll get it together. Saka and ESR play so well together, and really, Balogun just needs to play in the cups and just gain that confidence. That was not a good game for him to really start off in against Brentford.
There's a second way of thinking about this, and I think there's going to be a lot of. I don't think anyone's going to agree with me. But instead of Maitland-Niles, you could put Saka down there and then play Pepe up top. But then, for me, it's just that's a 50-50. But if he does that, I wouldn't be pissed off. I'd just be okay.
I'll be pissed off. I'll be very pissed off if he starts. This is just not the game for him. If you're going to sit down, hunker down, and go on the counterattack, we need people with outlets that can hold on to the ball. And Pepe isn't that. And I think this isn't the game to do that. That entire front line that you're looking at, in addition to the wing backs, what is common about all of them? They are secure on the ball, and they're athletes. They are athletes. They can go up and down. They can engage in the counter press. And I want a repeat of what we did at Stamford Bridge. I want energy, and I want people to control the center. That's what I want. I want to lock it down, and Pepe isn't that. As much as he has his uses in particular game states, this is not the one that we need. Brentford was his type of game. That was the type of game he should have thrived in. This one is not the type of game that, we need. This is us sitting down. We need outlets that will release pressure valve players, and he's just not that. He is a goal scorer, but he's not somebody that's going to get us out of a bind when we're hunkered in after 10 minutes of receiving pressure. I need my outlets to carry the ball for me. And look, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, it fills the best of both worlds here, because when you look at
But what if he's not willing to play? Who's your second alternative then? Let's just
Tavares. You can put Tavares at right wing back, but then you have to put.
But then you got
Saka
the
at left
problem
wing
of
back.
Marie. Then
Cedric is the next best bet that we have in terms of replicating that outside energy. I need somebody that is on the outside and is able to run. And right now, look, I don't trust Callum in this game right now. I think it's not good for him. Look, Chelsea's wide overloads are the things that facilitate their success. Okay, you cut that out, you cut out their chance creation. And to me, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, I'll be very pissed off with Arteta if he doesn't do it. He's absolutely the clear choice. Like, this is very glaringly obvious. I think if you put Tavares on the right wing back and you shunt out, Bukayo at left wing back, what you're doing is you're impacting the final third as well as the defense. You're now not just impacting one area of the pitch. At least with Saka and that front line that we had before, middle and defensive third are tight. They aren't. And if anything, there's just not as much goal threat. But guys, these games are won on margins, and I would rather be tight in the game at 0-0 and then go for it at the end than lose the game at the beginning. So for me, especially the game plan of sitting in, you got to go with what we had beforehand, so as not to impact multiple areas of the pitch. I would rather just attack be light, quote unquote, than the defense and the midfield.
And we kind of have to have somebody to come off the bench as well. We have a very weak bench, you know what I mean? So having Pepe maybe available to come off of the bench might be the best opportunity, because if you have it like this, you have all your eggs in this basket. If it doesn't work, you can't really change it. But I feel like you take Pepe and you sit him, and that's not to. There are other games for Pepe. This just isn't it. And a lot of this really just comes from his lack of defensive contribution. He tries, but he's really just not about that life. We need hard workers out there. Not saying he doesn't try, but Saka's just more of that person. So I predict if Arteta doesn't do the weird thing and overthink it, that this is probably what we'll see, and I'm perfectly okay with this.
Yeah, but the only reason why I would like that question is because what if he doesn't want to play right wing back?
He can't tell no. He's still working.
Yeah. He was training there, Sol.
Yeah,
he's training.
I know, I get that, but I'm only saying, like, I'm just trying to put like ourselves in that situation, just to see like what else could we do. But I do think, like, obviously I just don't see Pepe. For me, has to be an impact player in this game. Pepe suits more of teams where he can run in behind, and Chelsea are just not that team for me. And I think, if he comes off the bench, it's perfect for him. I think once that defense is either we've tired that defense out because we're pressing them, or we're giving them a hard time, they are going to start making mistakes once that 70, 80 minutes starts hitting in. And when you bring a Pepe on, who, let's be real, he is an efficient player. He can take his chances if given to him. And I think that's the moment where a lot more chances and a lot more, the game will open up. And that's when we need to bring these players off. Because Martinelli, I've always said, he reminds me of a bulldog that you've told to attack someone. He's just going to attack that player until it's like, it's worn out, basically. So, yeah, I think that's just the best balance you can bring. And then you've got a plan B on the bench with Aubameyang, Pepe, depending on obviously how Aubameyang is.
But Souls, I would actually do my backup plan as an entire kind of rearrange of that front line, where you do go Aubameyang and Oba Pepe if in the last 20 minutes you're able to search for a goal. And then you can chuck Bukayo at left wing back, chuck Tavares at right wing back if you're searching for a goal. I just think these games are decided on margins, and this idea that we don't have enough players in the center to really exert our game plan means that they're going to be living off scraps anyways, and I can't have a passenger who's not willing to participate in the counter press and keep the ball. That's the big thing for me. The counter press is going to be massive to us having any chance in this game. And I need the energy down that wing. I really do. And I just don't see Pepe able to do that both ways. And so if the game opens up, wonderful player to put off, and get that goal.
Like he did against Spurs. Like he did against Spurs. Like, when we beat them at home, he came off the bench. He had that really like awesome pass. Like he was that wild card that you need off the bench. And I just think we need that. I hope this is what Arteta goes with, but if he doesn't, then we'll just see, you know.
Can I ask one like major question? Because obviously I think a lot of Arsenal fans want to know this. How much would that lineup be impacted if Odegaard was available? Let's say he's fit, available, and ready to go. Because I don't think he gets in.
Well, the issue is we'd have to move to a 4-2-3-1, and
Yeah,
I
I
just
don't think he gets in. Yeah,
appropriate at the moment. I
Gabriel
think
and
you go with
Partey
what
make that
Man
decision
City.
for you. In my opinion, you don't have those two. You can't go to a 4. Very simple. You don't have any
No,
center
that-
control.
yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking like, yeah, I know he's not available, and don't get me wrong, I think the club is best stupid for it because like we're one of the only clubs who can get a player and not have his visa ready. But I'm just saying like he'd be off the bench option anyway at best because we do want to match him 1-to-1, and I think you could have either ESR or Odegaard. I don't think you can have them both in this. Well, they can't fit both in the system anyway. But
yeah, look, he could do the right wing role because he does press. I just don't think he's as great on the outside in terms of when he does go back. And so again, I'm more of a guy. I want us to press the living lights out of them. That's why I've chosen this front kind of 11, and I want the wing backs to compress the space because I think you give them the chance to run. Chelsea will outrun this team. We don't have our biggest runners, Gabriel and Partey, so don't give them the chance to do so. But yeah, like he could come in theory, you know, and put Bukayo at left wing back, you know. Those are things you could do, but again, it just comes back
I wouldn't.
to that.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it. I think because obviously even when you look at them against like Crystal Palace, for example, that's where a lot of their chances were created was because they allowed them to go wide and create those chances. And
Which
then
was so
when you
stupid.
and then the thing is, like with Crystal Palace, okay, fair enough. You can give them the benefit of the doubt. They don't really have a striker who can finish. But then if we do that and we're playing against, let's say Lukaku is fit and ready and everything like that, because he looks like he's in contention to start, that is suicidal. And that's why I do think you need to match that formation so you've got the wide overloads. Because when you look at it, ESR will press from high and help out defensively. Saka, well, we know that, you know, he started off his senior sort of career as a left back anyway, a left wing back, left back. And, you know, he's got that in his mindset, like he knows how to defend and he can do that up top. So it's just one of those where we need to nullify their threat, and that comes from their wing backs or their width. So it just makes perfect sense. I hope Arteta does it.
I want to thank Dublin Gunner for joining the channel. I really appreciate it. You're always here. Between you and Nashville Gunner, like I always check for you guys because you guys are always here. So thank you so much for joining the channel. I really appreciate it. And now your name is in green, which is perfect. I love it. So Christian Miller asked, do you guys think Smith Rowe is better than Odegaard? And it's one of those questions, right, where it's like, they're so different, you know, so it's hard to compare them. You know, it really, really is. I think they're so different. It's hard to compare. George, do you want to take a stab at this?
Yeah, very simply, yes. Emile Smith Rowe is better than Martin Odegaard for me. Yeah, it's quite simple, to be honest with you. I think I like Martin and the qualities that he does. He's really got an elite final ball. But for me, Emile Smith Rowe
he doesn't have the burst, does he?
No, I mean, it's true. He doesn't. And it's not only that, you know, I think Emile Smith Rowe has a lot more goal threat than Martin Odegaard as well. I think he's more suitable in multiple formations. He's more suited in different zones of the pitch. He's not suited to a specific formation. He could be an overlapping 8. He could be on the left wing. He could be in the hole. I don't think you can do the same with Martin. And he's a very specific type of player. And so for me, long term, I even think, you know, he's got a much better potential, to be honest with you, period. So maybe right now you could argue levels. I still think Emile is better. I still think he exerted way more influence on the team than Martin did in the same time that they were in the team, by the way, because it really wasn't much different. They both had the same opportunities. I felt Emile was a much more influential player than Martin. And I actually think going forward this season, I've earmarked Emile Smith Rowe to really book a ticket on the World Cup squad. And I think in order to do that, he has to have at minimum 10 to 15 goals or assists in the league this season for me. And he had 6 last season. And I think it's very reasonable to expect a doubling in that. I think Martin, again, I like him, but he's just not my profile player. He's not somebody that, you know, I think athletically there's a ceiling there. There's a ceiling with what you can do, especially in this league. So Yeah, I definitely think Emil Smith Rowe is better and will be in the long term as well.
Nah, I don't disagree, but I don't agree at the same time. I just think with right now, I do think Martin Odegaard's just a class above right now, and I just think because what he has to offer. The thing is, what we've also got to notice is when a player isn't truly settled because he knows, there's one foot back home, going back to Real Madrid, you don't truly play to your full potential. And then obviously he had the ankle injury in the international games, in the friendly that he played for Norway, and obviously he came back, and I do think he was carrying a little bit of that knock as well, and he was kind of rushed back into play. And you've got to also understand he was the most creative player at Arsenal in the time he was here. I'm not saying that ESR can't be better than him. I just think right now Odegaard for me is just slightly better for what we need than ESR, but I think they just complement each other, and I think they're good at different things, and that's why it's annoying to answer, because I can't say one is better, because then when I start talking about ESR, I'm like, well, actually, yeah, these things are better, and then when I talk about Odegaard, I'm like, yeah, these things are better, but in the same team, I just think they thrive and control games so much so to the point where I think that's got to be left wing ESR, in the middle, you play Odegaard, right wing Saka, and that's the way we move forward. I think you're on mute.
Ayatolani asks, any news on Nketiah and Nelson contract renewal or loan? I don't know anything. It's, and Nketiah is injured. And I was talking to somebody about this morning. And I still think there's a chance that he goes. I know some people feel like if you're injured, you can't get transferred, but that's not necessarily true. It depends on what the issue is. Can it be overcome? Do they really want the player? And is the failing the medical, you only fail a medical really if it's something that the club doesn't really know about and it comes out of nowhere. Like if they know about what he's going through and stuff. And I know Brighton was looking at him, but now they're looking at Darwin Nunez. I don't know if that's going to go through or not. And then Crystal Palace was also looking at him. So
they've got competition against Roma for that one. So that's if Roma is true, then not going to happen.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where it's up in the air. And then Nelson, I think Nketiah 100% will not sign a new deal, but
and Nelson, he's gone. I think he gets sold.
Yeah, and Nelson is probably going to do his renewal before he ends up going on loan to somewhere. And Brighton, it seems like the place that he'll go, or Crystal Palace. Like it's one of those where Crystal Palace and Brighton want both of them, but it just depends on what really happens.
I would love Brighton personally. Like I don't want him to go to Palace personally. I think it's a nice fun feeling, but I think the education he'd receive under Potter is far greater at Brighton. And I think actually they need somebody in his mold while Tariq is out, and I think it would do really good for him to play in that system.
Kieran Baines asks, what do you think of Ramsdale? It's one of those loaded questions. If you're just talking about Ramsdale just in general, young goalkeeper, definitely not the finished article, really talented. Football Twitter experts will tell you that he's shit because he got relegated twice, but actual experts of the game will say that he's one of the best young keepers and he's one of the most experienced young keepers, if not the most experienced in the Premier League. You don't get three big money moves in the Premier League for no reason. Like, you know what I mean? There has to be something there. Again, not the finished article, but he's somebody that the club really wanted. There will be changes to the homegrown rules. So I feel like somebody like him would go for 3 or 4 times as much in the next couple of years if we hadn't got him now. And Sheffield feel like they pretty much gave him away for nothing because they know what they had. They wanted 40. We ended up getting him for 25. So we have to see him in the shirt. I like his initial attitude. I think it's one of those we have to wait and see. But I think the response to him has been overblown, very over the top, OTT, dramatic. And I wouldn't listen to football Twitter experts. I'd actually listen to people that know what they're talking about in terms of goalkeepers. And you don't start in the Premier League. Like most 23-year-olds are buried on number 3s, number 2s if they're lucky. I think Emi Martinez was a backup at Rotterdam or on loan at Rotterdam or something at 23. You just don't get these types of minutes at that age. So there's got to be something there, but we'll see what they can make out of him because he's definitely not the finished article.
He's going to
That's what I
surprise
truly
a lot
think.
of. He's going to surprise a lot of people, Jess. I'm glad I put my flag very vocally. I don't know if people in the chat have seen my post, but I think Ramsdale's a lot better than what people think. I do rate Aaron Ramsdale quite highly, and while again I think there was some better quality to cost ratios that we could have done, namely Andre Onana, who is much more complete now. I think Ramsdale has a much higher ceiling, and yeah, I definitely think that we've got a special player here. I think the way that he's talked about just in the professional game, but also in terms of if you start looking at the qualities that he has and the qualities that we are missing right now in our keeper, he really is a lot of the antithesis of Leno. And if you see a lot of the stats, there's a lot of weird stuff going on, but his shot stopping is not that much different. Adam Vogue has showed that kind of through our little favorite, stats expert there, shown it's really not that much different to Leno. But again, I've got a debate actually upcoming on my channel about Aaron Ramsdale to kind of quell a lot of the weird fears about it. But again, I rate him. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people, and he absolutely is the number one this season. Not in a couple of years, but this season.
Let's see. This is an interesting question. Matthew says, what do you want to see from Pepe in order that we re-up his contract? I have to be honest. We're fattening him up for sale. I think he's gone next summer because you have to offer him a new deal. Because after this season, he will have been here for 3, right?
And he'll be 27.
And he'll be 27. So I don't think we re-up his contract. I think we sell him to somewhere in France or Italy for 30 to 40 million next summer after he plays decently for us this season. But Souls, what do you think about that? Is Pepe somebody that you see as a long-term fit? Do you think he'll stay, go? Would you offer him a new deal based on what you've seen? What are your thoughts on Pepe?
I don't think he's as good as we thought he'd be. Forget about price tags and everything like that, but even just the hype he had around him and what we expected of him isn't what we got. I'm not going to say he flopped, but he's very deceiving to the eye. And yes, he had good moments. Yes, he ended the season well, but people have short-term memories. Like he's clearly being dropped a lot because he's not good enough, and that's something I just think people don't want to accept it because it's one of the favorites in the fan base. And for me, it's like, what's he done that deserves a new contract? Nothing much, in my opinion. And I think, it's one of those where there's much better. We have to play him in certain games. We can't sit there and go every single game suits him. And that's a problem when if he does get a contract renewal, that'll be one of the more expensive wages on our books. And you need them to be able to suit and fit every single style of game, not just we've got to play to his specific needs. And we're not trying to build a team around him anyway. And the way that we're trying to build up now doesn't suit him. It doesn't suit the like of Aubameyangs and your Pepes. And unfortunately, if we want to move forward, we've got to sell him, in my opinion, or not give him a contract. But I can't see him go for free. But I do think he can still recoup a 30 to 40 million pound fee if he can have a decent season.
Yeah, I think because I think Arteta has decided that he knows he needs to treat him in a certain way in order to get him out with a fee. I don't think he's sold on Pepe just because he's playing him, if that makes sense. The players that he really likes are like, he loves ESR Sak as his favorite. He wanted Odegaard. Pepe is a counter-attacking player, and we don't play that way. He needs tons of space in behind. Arteta talks about that a lot. We're never going to play with space in behind because it will be a possession team. The space will be behind us, so he just doesn't fit. But good player, definitely not worth the price tag. Definitely adds some value. But I mean, people are like 27 is his prime. And yes, that's true. But that also 27 is his prime. And look at his level, so we're not saying he's 27 and he's old. We're saying he's 27, he's in his prime and he can't get in the team over Saka, so that's really the reality with that. Nalitaba says, question, Jess, how impactful was Odegaard for Arsenal last season? Exclamation points. What were his stats and all? I think he had like 2 goals and 2 assists. Context is important. Came from another league. came from another team where he was buried on the bench. He was playing tons of minutes for Real Sociedad, was one of the best midfielders in La Liga that season, then was buried on the bench for Real Madrid, didn't play, had a tough adaptation period, got injured. Impactful, a lot of people will look at it and, this is where we want to use stats. And really, for an attacking midfielder, a 10, you are going to look at goals and assists, but he's a typical like pre-assist guy. He's the guy before the pass, and he's just that person. So he did impact us, and I think he improved us. But I think what maybe the difficulty, or maybe the reluctancy around him, is that he didn't impact us in terms of goals, like straight up goals. Like he just didn't have that presence. So maybe that's why people feel like he didn't impact us, because the stats don't say so. But I do think he improved us. George, what do you think the impact of Odegaard was for us last season?
So I think stats love him. He had the biggest expected threat kind of on the team, but again, that's limited by sample size, which people don't like to quote. They misuse these stats quite often. I think that the injury hampered his progress. I think he was on quite a roll prior to injury within the international team. I think that his influence on the game could have been more. There weren't enough times that he did West Ham, and that was a mentality shift. It wasn't just, the conditions were perfect. I thought he grabbed the scruff of the neck of that game, and I didn't see that enough from him on a consistent basis. It's another one that I felt as though, while output is lacking, I don't think you need output necessarily to be a great attacking midfielder. In fact, that's why I think Emile Smith Rowe did so well for us last year, and why I valued his influence. I don't think his output was particularly amazing, but his impact on the team and what he did for us going forward and backwards was enough to make the difference in many games. And I just don't feel as though Odegaard did that as frequently enough for me. But I think creatively, he was probably our most creative in open play in terms of through balls and final balls. But again, I have this debate on Twitter because it seems like creativity is viewed with this weird eye of the Ozil pass, and that's it. And, creativity, like when you're talking about creativity, that's getting out of trouble. What Bukayo does as a release valve is creative in terms of his runs, his out to in runs, what even Aubameyang and these off movement kind of strikers do. That is creative. It pulls defenses apart. This is all part of the conversation. I just think for me, when you have a player like him who is so on the ball dominant, he has to exert himself in games a lot more. And I don't think he did. I definitely think that there's room for improvement. I just don't think he showed the level that he can. And so I think there's scope to improve there. But I wouldn't say he was useless. Like, that's ridiculous.
No,
he was
it
a very
definitely
important
wasn't
player.
useless.
Yeah.
He definitely improves us. And again,
Yeah.
just going back to that point of like, he's a specific type of player. So with him, we'll be playing a specific type of way, which isn't necessarily my number one. Like if it was up to me, I would have everybody would be a freaking sprinter. They'd all be athletes. They'd be running real hard. They'd be playing on the counterattack, and they'd be banging in goals. I don't really love the slow positional play, passing, creating space with triangles. That's not really my jam. But when I watch Odegaard, I am happy. I'm like, he's very good on the ball. I think he works real hard. He is a leader. He's not a yelly shouty, but he definitely leads. And we brought in like 3 captains at this point, haven't we? Odegaard, Lokonga, we have Tierney. It's crazy. Like I think we're gonna see a difference in these next couple of years in the energy, the vibe, everything about this team. I think is going to change, especially when we get some of the Bellerins and the Xhakas out as well, because they tend to be dominant. And I'm looking forward to it, to be honest. George, did you want to say something else, or
Just really quickly, like Pepe and Oba will love Odegaard. Like that's the one thing. I want to be consistent. Like if I'm going to sit there and say James Maddison has a consistent final ball, which he does, like Odegaard does, and we don't have somebody in the team that can provide that. So I think those two would love somebody like him behind them. Again, I don't think you absolutely need that, but just to give kind of the devil's advocate answer, he solves something that we don't have. So yeah, young, still improvement. I still think there's a ceiling on that talent and on that play in the league. I maintain it. Hope to be proven wrong, because that just means that Arsenal and him succeeding. So I hope to be wrong, but I just think there's a limit to that type, and that's why I hope we do something more in the window, because I still think we've got one more surprise left in us, personally.
All right, you guys, we're going to end it there. There's about 261 of you guys watching on all platforms. That's on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, whatever. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. I have pinned the link for the membership. You can become a member of the channel, just like Dublin Gooners did today. Tuesday, we'll be breaking down the Chelsea-Arsenal match. Hopefully, we'll be talking about a win. If not, we'll break it down anyway. Next time you guys will see us will be on Sunday, game day, instant reaction. No watch along for this one, but we'll definitely be here for instant reaction to break down the game, talk winners, losers, man of the match, and let you guys have your say because you're able to call in on those shows. Yeah, we'll see you guys then. Enjoy your Saturday, and we'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye, guys. Sorry, I'm not ready.